Well, it's good to see each one of you here today, and thank you again for being here. It's nice to see a few more faces in the crowd. There was a time back in 2018, I guess, that we had, there was a couple Sundays, we had 9 here, including me. There's a lot more than 9 here today. Just about this whole side more than 9. Maybe a couple more. But thank y'all again, and we're going to continue on with something I'm attempting to do. I haven't had much success in the past, but we're gonna see where God leads, and we're talking about the commands of Jesus. You know, first week we talked about repenting. Last week we talked about following Jesus. Direct commands from Jesus himself. And today we see Jesus seated on the side of a mountain teaching. He begins with what we call the Beatitudes, talking about all that those are blessed. I think that I fall into several of those categories, if not all of them, from time to time. So I really relate to them. They're beautiful words. But at the end of it, in verses 11 and 12, Jesus continues and he says, "Blessed are you when people insult you." Have you ever been insulted before? I think we probably all have. Not a great feeling. Blessed are you when people persecute you and falsely say all kinds of evil things against you because of me. Haven't experienced a great deal of that, but I have experienced some of it. And it's really difficult to respond to. And probably didn't respond very well when I was younger, maybe a little bit better as I'm older. But in the last verse, Jesus gives us our word for today. And that is to rejoice and be glad. It's not something that I think we use a lot. I can't remember saying very many times, "Boy, I'm rejoicing today." Although there have been many joyous times in my life. Happy times when I felt nothing but just great blessing from God. So I may not have said it, but I certainly felt it. And to rejoice, just a Merriam-Webster's definition, is to feel or express joy. That's obvious. Triumph, glory, delight. To me, this kind of falls into the mountaintop category. Those highlights of our life, the good times, the best of times. So, it's really hard to talk about the mountaintops without talking about the valleys. Even the valley of the shadow of death. The opposite of rejoicing are words like anger, outrage, distress, irritation. You know, I think back to some of those mountaintop experiences in my life, but it's just, I think it's just human nature. Maybe it's Satan himself. I don't know where exactly the source of it comes from, but I do know that it seems like the bad memories come flooding in to try to overtake my moments of joy. So I think about the bad times in the past. So I think one of the things that stands in our way is our dwelling on the past and the bad times. Got a few things here to share with you. It says, have you ever wondered, why did God let me suffer that injury, lose my job, have a car accident, forget the appointment, have a fight with my spouse, let my parents get divorced, let me be born with a defect? I can relate to a couple. But I think we've all wondered that. You know, I think back to almost 40 years ago. We were freshmen in college and got the phone call. You've heard me share with it before about our good friend Rodney Long. He was supposed to meet us here at home. We were all coming home from college, going to spend the Valentine's weekend, I think it was, at home. Got home about 5 o'clock. I was eating supper with my dad. Phone rang. Kyle Collins asked me, he says, hey, you talked to Rodney? No, I hadn't. And Rodney was what you would call a mama's boy. He didn't go anywhere without talking to his mom. And she hadn't talked to him since the day before. I came back to the table and sat down, and my dad said, son, I'm afraid Rodney's dead. Boy, that hit you like a ton of bricks. Unfortunately, he was right. See, he knew Rodney, and he knew what kind of boy he was. And Rodney didn't leave school without calling his mom, and he probably called her 2 or 3 times on the road. That's just the kind of person he was. For those of you who knew J.W. Griffith, Mary, I think that Rodney would have grown up to be a J.W. I mean, he was the best in young men. I can't tell you one bad thing about Rodney, and I'm not just saying that because he's gone, but I'm just telling you the truth. He was the nicest guy, friendly to everybody. Why does God allow that to happen? Can't answer that. It's a mystery that I'll take with me to my grave. You can also discover how God can redeem the situation and bring benefits to your life as a result of suffering. Scripture teaches us that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them that are called according to his purpose. Romans 8:28. Now that's a very comforting scripture to quote, but it's hard to rely upon those words when you're going through the eye of the hurricane. When that storm is there, when you get that bad news, it's tough. It says, unless we accept God's grace to deal with suffering, inevitably you will become bitter. However, if you choose to turn and trust God to bring about his purpose through the suffering, you can avoid the trap of bitterness and grow in the grace and knowledge of the Lord. 2 Corinthians 5:7 says that we live by faith and not by sight. You know, we sing that song, I got a mansion over the hilltop. I don't know about the mansion. I don't know what it looks like, but I know it's going to be a wonderful place one day when we all get there. I have faith that what the Bible teaches me will one day come true. I don't know when that day will be. Tomorrow, 1,000 years, or 1,000,000 years from tomorrow, but I believe it's going to come true. How about this? How about if we try to discern the benefits of our suffering? Boy, could there be a more unpopular subject than that? Look on the bright side, they say. That's not something that you want to hear. Here's a question. How can this situation help me understand more about Christ? Wow. Is that something we've ever thought about? Jesus suffered much. He was despised and rejected of men, a man of sorrows, acquainted with grief, from Isaiah 53. He was ridiculed, betrayed, beaten, humiliated, abandoned, and falsely accused. Jesus went through some tough times too, just like we do. How can God use a bad situation of suffering to produce humility in us? See, Proverbs tells us that God hates pride. And I talk about being humbled. It says, therefore, when you suffer, you should look for ways to learn humility. One of my favorite verses, Micah 6:8 says, He hath showed thee, O man, what is good, and what doth the Lord require of thee, but to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with thy God. I can tell you that a lot of my sufferings in my life were to bring about humility. And while I don't just sit here and tell you that, man, those were some of the best things that ever happened to me, I can tell you that they helped me. Helped me to become the person that I am today. It says, what character qualities can God develop in me through a suffering situation? Could I learn patience as a result of the circumstance? What can this situation teach me about the need for alertness, being aware? How can I learn obedience as a result of the situation? Could this suffering motivate me to express gratefulness for things I've previously taken for granted? Boy, guilty of that. Can I develop more compassion for others because of this experience? Is this a situation God's loving discipline to correct me? We don't ever like to think about it being God's chastisement, but He does that. Just like we have done for our children as they were growing up. I never really understood it when my dad took his belt off and said, son, I'm only doing this because I love you. I didn't appreciate it at the time. But I can tell you that I appreciate it today, what he did for me. Did this happen to me because of the iniquity of others? We can also suffer as a result of others' iniquities. For example, children frequently must deal with the consequences of the parents' bad choices. If your employer makes foolish decisions, you probably will suffer too. If your spouse is ignorant of or rejects God's design for marriage, both of you will suffer. And that goes both ways. Although you cannot completely avoid suffering that comes as a consequence of other sins, you can avoid becoming bitter about it. The choice is ours. You heard me talk a couple of years ago about going through a time in my life called the Great Sadness. I stole the term from Paul Young's book, The Shack. And I look back on that period of time in my life. It lasted about 16 months or so. And I thought I was just right in the lowest point of the shadow of death. although I knew in reality it could get a lot worse, seemed pretty bad at the time. I can tell you around the Dismuke household, there wasn't a lot of rejoicing going on in that period of time. But I'll tell you something that was going on there. It was a time of prayer and a time of faith. I told my wife that God would restore our family in His time. Unfortunately, in the world that we live in and the society in which we dwell, everything is right now. It's instant. There's no waiting for anything. So we weren't really excited about the fact of praying for God's will to be done in His time. But nonetheless, we prayed that, and I knew that it would. I said it might be this year, it might be next year, it might be 10 years from now. I said I don't know when it's going to be, but I was sure that God would restore our family. And then we got the phone call. God did exactly what we asked Him to do, pretty much. And thus ended the great sadness period of my life. I've often heard that you don't truly appreciate something until you lose it. And I can tell you that today, as I wake up, I saw something this week about the two greatest gifts, something like that, is when you open your eyes, your two eyes. Think about that. And that's something that I take for granted all the time, my ability to see each one of you. If you don't know what I'm talking about, put on a blindfold and walk around for a couple of hours. Let your sight be taken away and how much you appreciate it. It's not unlike anything else, how much you really appreciate it. And I can tell you that today, that I've had some things taken away from me. God has given me other blessings. And today, January 19th, 2020, I accept all that God has taken away and what God has given me. And I can tell you that even though you may not see me hooping and hollering and amening and running up and down the aisles like Freddie Keener. Freddie Keener's a great preacher and a great friend of mine. He'll get out there and he'll kick his feet up and he gets excited. I just don't get that excited. I can tell you when I get real excited, my mind goes blank and I can't even think about what I'm talking about. I do my best to just keep my thoughts gathered. But that doesn't mean that I'm not just bubbling over with joy today, because I can't tell you how much I appreciate each one of you for being here, for being a part of this church family. So I want to challenge each one of you today to think about the good things in your life. It's real easy to have 15 things go your way during the day and one bad thing happen and it ruins your whole day. You see, that's the way Satan works. He's got that little red angel sitting on your shoulder whispering in your ear, making that bad thing seem so much bigger than it really is. When really, all it is just a bump in the road. God's got a smoother road out ahead of you. You just got to make it through the bumps. So I want to challenge you today to let's focus and concentrate on the things in our life that brings us joy, the blessings of God. Yes, I know we got to deal with the tough times, the bad times, the valleys. But it's God and the love of Jesus that can help us through it all. As Pat and Sherry come, I would just ask you to get your song books, and we're going to sing number 20. And we'll sing the first and second verses. Y'all sing out and help me with this, Mary Jean. Search me, O God, and know my heart today. Try me, O Savior, know my thoughts, I pray. See if there be some wicked way in me. Cleanse me from every sin and set I pray, O Lord, cleansing me from sin, fulfill thy word and make me pure within. It's my hope that each one of us can find at least one thing each day to praise God for and to rejoice about. They're there. We just can't let the bad stuff overtake us. If you would, let's bow our heads. Most gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you for loving us. We thank us for your holy word. Lord, help us to be joyful and rejoice because of all that you do for us today and in the days ahead. And may your love and the grace of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ and the power of the Holy Spirit watch over us, direct us, help us to make the right decisions and set us on the right path. Give us strength to overcome the negative thoughts and the bad things that happen in our lives and to seek your face and to be joyful in our hearts. In Jesus' precious name we pray. And all God's people said, Amen. Thank you.